The Harlem Renaissance was centered in Harlem, New York. It was an African American cultural movement known for its proliferation in art, music, and literature. The movement brought African Americans to embrace music, art, and literature. It helped to also define a period in which African American artists reclaimed their identity and racial pride in defiance of widespread prejudice and discrimination. Harlem was meant to be an upper-class neighborhood for white people, but overdevelopment led to many landlords trying to fill the houses. Soon, a few middle-class black families started moving into the area, which the white people did not like and tried to push them out, but ended up failing and leaving instead. With the influx of African Americans, it had paved the way for the first play in Harlem that featured complex African American characters. The great number of African Americans moving into Harlem was known as Great Migration. The Great Migration was because of World War I, which left a lot of job openings, which led to people moving north to get those jobs. But as World War I had ended, those same people came back to get their jobs that were now the African Americans. This led to the Red Summer because the black people were not going to give up so easily. After this, there was even more movement from African Americans towards Harlem.
Major social, cultural events such as fashion and entertainment. Fashion in the 1920s, women drastically changed their appearance. The bob hairstyle was adopted and gave a more masculine look. This was a move away from the conservative and restrictive lifestyles that shaped women and their manners. The clocher hat also became very popular for women and allowed them to hide their hair in it. Men wore well-tailored suits to show off their cleanliness and up-to-date trends. For entertainment, a way to show off African American talent were nightclubs. One of the most famous ones of the time period was the Cotton Club. The Cotton Club hosted many kinds of entertainment such as singing and dancing. The acts featured all African Americans. The Cotton Club was a New York City nightclub located in Harlem. Harlem would also be known as a place known for the Harlem Renaissance. Philosophy and purpose. What characterized the Harlem Renaissance was an overt racial pride in the developing idea of a new black identity that through intellect and production of literature, art, and music could challenge the pervading racism and promote progressive politics. It encompassed a wide variety of styles, including pan-African perspectives, high culture and low culture, traditional music to blues and jazz, traditional and experimental forms in literature such as modernism, and the new form of jazz poetry.
Characteristics of literature during the Harlem Renaissance often included socialism and/or communism. Even though they're not the same thing, political authors would still favor these political ideas because of the equal distribution in which they represented among people in an area. Racial division is relevant because of all the segregation. It affected how a black person thought of themselves. During the Jazz Age, it began with African Americans, and a lot of people would shape their poems to sound like jazz. During the Great Migration, a lot of people moved north to find jobs. And lastly, duality, because a lot of black people understood white and black culture. Was very prevalent during the Harlem Renaissance included influence of slavery, effects of racism, black identity, and conveying the black culture. This was very important during the Harlem Renaissance because it meant blacks finally had a standard for their culture and their race. They were able to define themselves and choose their own destiny.
Such as Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, Aaron Douglas, and Jessie Redden Fawcett were great representations of this era. One of the excerpts from Langston Hughes' essay stated, "No fear," Nina Simone repeats. The grainy footage becomes a sea of her black woman's eyes. Thick and smoky with a black pencil, her stare is imperturbable, staring into the interviewer's face as if the idea of a black person living fearless in the country is actually a possibility. Langston Hughes' excerpt shows major key points that forwards itself to the Harlem Renaissance. With the philosophy of having racial pride and a new way to be seen, the era falls in line with the quote and vice versa. Things such as Simone having no fear as she stares into the interviewer's face show Simone living fearlessly as a black woman in the time period, which gives several of characteristics of the Harlem Renaissance as a whole. With that said, Langston, a social activist, uses literature to promote progressive politics, which helped give a new identity to African Americans.